We begin in Tehran, where the solemn mood of National Firefighters Day became the stage for a forceful political statement. Before a hall filled with uniformed firefighters, men and women whose duty is to confront danger to save lives, Iran's President Masoud Pzeskian delivered a speech that blended tribute with defiance. He praised the courage of first responders while denouncing renewed international sanctions, and in doing so, set a combative tone for Iran's position on the global stage. The ceremony, typically reserved for honouring the bravery and sacrifice of the nation's firefighters, quickly turned into a platform for a wider political message. As cameras rolled and the audience listened attentively, Pzeskian launched into a sharp rebuke of the so-called snapback mechanism, a process revived by Britain, France and Germany at the United Nations Security Council to reimpose sanctions on Iran over its nuclear programme. With measured but firm words, the president declared, "The snapback mechanism is nothing but an attempt to bring Iran to its knees, a notion that exists only in the minds of those who wish to undermine our country." He paused, scanning the faces of the firefighters before him, then added with conviction, "This is the truth," a phrase that drew nods and a round of applause from the audience. The applause was not merely ceremonial. It reflected the mood in the hall, one of defiance and solidarity. Pzeskian's tone suggested that the renewed sanctions were more than just a technical measure against Iran's nuclear activities. To him, they represented an assault on the country's dignity and sovereignty. He framed the Western move as part of a larger pattern of external pressure designed to erode Iran's independence. Far from backing down, he said, Iran would refuse to yield and continue charting its own course. But the president did not limit his criticism to European powers. In a pointed shift, he turned to Israel's role in the region, delivering one of the most striking moments of the address. Masoud Pzeskian said, "A country that has, in reality, thrown the whole region into chaos. Not once has the Security Council sanctioned it. Not once has it condemned it." The words landed heavily in the room. For many in the audience, citizens who have seen decades of regional instability, the statement resonated deeply. Once again, the hall erupted in applause, signalling strong approval of the president's stance. Pzeskian went on to accuse Israel of destabilizing the Middle East while enjoying protection from accountability, largely due to the support it receives from the United States, which has repeatedly used its veto power at the UN Security Council. This, he suggested, revealed deep double standards in global diplomacy. The president's accusations against Israel underscored a long-held position in Tehran that peace in the Middle East is impossible without confronting what it views as Israeli aggression and occupation. The setting made the speech all the more symbolic. The ceremony honoured the firefighters of Iran, men and women who routinely risk their lives battling blazes, responding to industrial accidents and saving communities. Pzeskian drew a deliberate connection between their sacrifice and what he called the nation's collective resilience against foreign pressure. By linking the service of firefighters to the country's political struggles, he sought to convey that Iran's resistance was not just a matter for politicians, but a quality embedded in the character of its people. The renewed sanctions that triggered Pzeskian's remarks were announced only days earlier by the European powers and the United Nations. The measures reinstate a wide range of restrictions. They include limits on Iran's oil exports, a vital source of the nation's revenue. They tighten banking and financial transactions, making it harder for Tehran to access international markets. They restore a ban on uranium enrichment and reprocessing, aimed at curbing any steps toward weapons capability. They prohibit ballistic missile activities capable of carrying nuclear warheads. And they impose asset freezes and travel bans on designated Iranian individuals and entities. Western leaders insist these steps are essential to prevent nuclear proliferation, but Iranian officials have consistently rejected such claims, insisting that the country's nuclear program is peaceful, focused on energy production and medical research. Pzeskian seized on this dispute to argue that the sanctions were not about security, but about exerting political pressure and weakening Iran's economy. He portrayed the measures as unfair targeting that punished ordinary Iranians while failing to address the roots of regional conflict. The sanctions have a long history. Many were originally lifted under the 2015 Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, the international nuclear deal aimed at limiting Iran's nuclear program in exchange for sanctions relief. But after the United States withdrew from the agreement in 2018, tensions escalated. Iran expanded its enrichment activities, and Western nations grew more alarmed. Now, with the European powers invoking the snapback mechanism, the punitive measures are back in force. Pzeskian framed this not as a neutral response to technical violations, but as a broader pattern of hostility toward Iran's independence. In his speech, the president's tone alternated between combative and reflective. He lauded the firefighters for their heroism, describing them as symbols of courage and perseverance, qualities he urged the entire nation to embody. He told them their service represented the spirit of the Iranian people, who do not bow to threats or coercion. For many watching the event live on national television, the juxtaposition of a ceremonial occasion with hard-edged political commentary served as a vivid reminder of how deeply foreign policy issues permeate domestic life in Iran. Beyond the ceremony, the president's remarks are certain to reverberate abroad. Western governments are likely to reject his assertions, insisting that their actions are guided by concerns over nuclear proliferation rather than geopolitical rivalry. European diplomats have repeatedly said that the snapback sanctions are designed to uphold global security and non-proliferation commitments. Israel, for its part, has long argued that Iran's nuclear activities pose an existential threat, a claim Tehran categorically denies. The renewed war of words points to a deepening diplomatic rift. On one side, Iran insists it is being unfairly targeted for asserting its right to peaceful nuclear technology. On the other, Western powers and Israel claim Tehran's intentions cannot be trusted without strict limits and inspections. Pzeskian's comments in Tehran signalled that his government will not compromise easily, setting the stage for further friction at the United Nations and in negotiations with world powers. The speech also had a domestic political dimension. By addressing the issue in front of firefighters, ordinary citizens widely respected for their service, the president tapped into a sense of national pride and unity. He portrayed the country as collectively resisting external pressure, much as firefighters confront dangers without hesitation. The reaction from the audience, repeated applause and standing ovations, suggested that his message resonated at least with those present in the hall. For analysts, the address illustrates a broader strategy by Tehran to frame the nuclear dispute not as a technical disagreement over enrichment levels, but as part of a larger struggle for sovereignty and justice. By presenting Iran as both defiant and victimized, Pzeskian seeks to rally public support at home while challenging the moral authority of his critics abroad. Diplomatic observers note that such rhetoric may complicate any renewed efforts at dialogue. While some voices in Europe still favour engagement to salvage elements of the 2015 nuclear deal, hardening positions on both sides make compromise increasingly difficult. Pzeskian's remarks, particularly his sharp attack on Israel and criticism of the United Nations' alleged double standards, are likely to provoke strong reactions in Western capitals. Yet within Iran, the speech may strengthen the president's standing among constituents who see resistance to foreign pressure as a point of national honour. For them, his declaration, "The snapback mechanism is nothing but an attempt to bring Iran to its knees," captures a widely shared sentiment that the country should not submit to what they regard as unjust external demands. The symbolism of the setting was not lost on many observers. On a day meant to honour those who risk their lives to protect the public, the president called on the nation to recognise a different kind of struggle, one he described as defending Iran's right to determine its own future. By linking the bravery of firefighters with the nation's defiance of sanctions, he sought to craft a narrative of collective resilience. As the ceremony concluded, Pzeskian received a standing ovation. The applause echoed not just as a gesture of respect for the office he holds, but as an expression of shared resolve. In that moment, the firefighters, usually the first to respond to emergencies in their communities, stood as symbols of a country determined, in the president's words, to resist external coercion and continue its path independently. For the international community, however, the message was clear. Iran's leadership does not intend to soften its position in response to renewed sanctions. Instead, it is likely to double down on its narrative of resistance and to demand that the world address what it views as imbalances in global diplomacy. In the days ahead, attention will turn to the response from European capitals, Washington and Tel Aviv. Will Pzeskian's defiance harden existing positions, or will it prompt new diplomatic initiatives to prevent further escalation? Much will depend on whether either side is willing to step back from entrenched stances. For now, the speech has added another layer of tension to an already fraught international landscape. In closing, the key lines of the president's address continue to reverberate. Masoud Pzeskian said, "The snapback mechanism is nothing but an attempt to bring Iran to its knees, a notion that exists only in the minds of those who wish to undermine our country." And again, with pointed reference to Israel, he added, "A country that has in reality thrown the whole region into chaos. Not once has the Security Council sanctioned it. Not once has it condemned it." These words, delivered in a ceremony meant to honour first responders, now frame Iran's political narrative as it confronts renewed sanctions and ongoing geopolitical rivalry. As the cameras turned off and the audience dispersed, the symbolism lingered. A hall of firefighters applauding a leader's defiance, a nation wrestling with external pressure, and a message aimed not just at domestic supporters, but at the world, that Iran, in Pzeskian's words, will stand firm.